I agree with Ahmed, maybe just in different sequence, and probably I will give a bonus threat, if you like. So yes, phishing, and just because, anywhere in the world, it is still the biggest threat, right? Phishing still accounts for about 80%, and if we're talking empirical data now, it accounts for about 80% of threats, right? So now, whether it's through smishing, whether it's SMS, whether it's voice, whether it's email, it still comes down to phishing. Malware, completely also agree, and this is whether it's the malware that encrypts your system, which you call ransomware, whether it's the malware that steals your data, whether it's, just different forms of malware, yes. Credential stuffing, which is what he was talking about, okay? Which is really talking about the fact that, Share Security talks about the fact that 90% of the attempted login on retail websites are a result of credential stuffing attacks. So, not to call any brand name, but most of the time when you hear that this airline has been hacked and there's a data breach there, or this email provider there's a data breach, your credentials have been stolen, and like you said, they are sold on the dark web. And those credentials are then used in credential stuffing attacks, because they probably are using the same passwords everywhere, anyway.
Oh, okay. So maybe I should give a story here. So cloud security threats, it's easy to Google that and name it, but let me use a real life scenario. During the lockdown, okay, I attended a birthday party of, one of a head of HR for a massive company, okay, present in about 25 countries. And at the birthday party, her daughter comes to me and keeps calling 4 digits. So let me not call the 4 digits, because the 4 digits were the pin to the mom's phone, right? And she's calling these 4 digits, and she keeps calling the 4 digits. And, at the point I asked her, what are these 4 digits you're calling? And she says, oh, it's the pin to my mom's phone, okay? And so she brings the phone. Now, mom is attending to all the guests. She brings the phone, and she punches in the pin. And the first place I go, so her mom is a friend I have been talking to about cyber hygiene, but she just didn't see how they're a construction company. She didn't see, what exactly does cyber have to do with what I'm doing? So I check on the phone, I go to her Outlook, I see an email there. That email is talking about the fact that they had just had a compliance issue from a data protection perspective with the government, and the government was about to issue a fine. Okay, now this was a company in Europe. I took a screenshot, and so the conversation in that email was with top management saying, let's keep this between ourselves and see how we deal with it. So I take a screenshot, and then the birthday's over, we take all the drinks and all, and we go. And then I send her the screenshot 3 days later. And she says, oh my goodness, how did you get this? And I said, your daughter knows the password to your phone. And you are on the cloud, which means that your information is just available just from anywhere. And she says, oh my goodness, every time my daughter is trying to do her homework, she needs a device, right? And so I just give her the device. And every time she's calling me, mommy, the phone is locked, please put the password. And at a point I got tired and I just said, you know what, here is the password, go.
Yes. For example, in the US or in the UK, there's a clear line that I can call. So I stay in London. There's a clear line that I can call and report cyber incidents for citizens at the basic level. I stayed in places in Africa too, where I knew that from consulting with various companies, you see that the same trade, sometimes the same trade actor, in a particular instance, the same individual was carrying out the same cyber incident across various companies. But it was not just clear who to report to. Somebody said report to the police, go to the police station, because somehow in our part of the world in Africa, every issue is supposed to be reported to the police. Okay, it's just not clear exactly who to report to. And then, like we said, they have, when you identify those critical sectors and you identify exactly how you are going to recover, you then need to have some sort of standardized matrix to a level, so that if in my company I report to you and say a critical asset just went down, and in his company he tells you a critical asset just went down, you are able to know that critical means ABCD because we have defined what critical means. So there's some unification in that conversation. We're all on the same page. 2 C's. So the first C, cyber laws. And this is one that we seem to have a lot of cyber laws. So I think that part of the strategic approach should be cyber laws. Cyber laws for me should be both substantive and procedural. Otherwise, you could have them sitting on one leg. And I think that the Budapest Convention, where 60 countries sort of signed a treaty to some of the laws, I think that is good guidance in terms of cyber laws. The last C for me is having a healthy cybersecurity ecosystem. And I will dwell here a bit. One of the things that actually is killing the cybersecurity entrepreneur in Africa is because a lot of the companies do not really respect what we call our local laws that say before a vendor brings in a solution from another country, he needs to partner with a local person. And so when you partner with a local person, of course there is a margin. Of course there's a 5-10% just so that company can keep working. But what then happens is procurement bypass the local guy and go straight to the vendor. I know 5 companies that were operating in tens of thousands of dollars exactly 5 years ago. Only 4 of them are working today in Nigeria. And the last guy who is presently working, well, he's working for someone else. He's no longer really in operation. Why? Simply because they bypassed it, and like you said, there's no one to really report to. So because you bypass those entrepreneurs, they end up not being able to work or leverage skill or be able to run the companies or employ people. The other part is around training. They have spoken a lot about the gaps, 1.5 million jobs open, all those kind of things with regards to cybersecurity. Correct. What do I think government can be doing? I think that it could partner with organizations. I also agree to a large extent that in the universities, we need to begin to teach courses in Africa driven by policy that are relevant. Because what happens presently is you go into the university and after 4 years you come out with a world that was totally different from what you went into, and all the skills are no longer relevant. In the UK, for example, you have 23 courses at postgraduate on cybersecurity. You have 4 at undergraduate on cybersecurity. I don't know that we have any of that in any of the countries in Africa. So we're still learning all the assembly languages and all these things. So I think that is important. And then collaborative intelligence sharing. I think that is really the future. Otherwise, if we continue in silos, we keep repeating the same mistakes across board. And finally, citizen awareness. Citizen awareness has been spoken about extensively, so I don't want to bother about it. But just one thing. In the US, for example, Homeland have a portal where every government employee, has to go do some sort of learning. It will also be good if we begin to introduce things like that in our continent. And I think finally, we always talk about security being a shared responsibility, and the fact that the chain is really as strong as its weakest link. And the whole point of having this conversation is to ensure that we do not make Africa the weakest link. Thank you very much. You can connect with me, those are my details. Make sure that you are able to show an ID card, right? That's identification and authentication, to enter the car, and the driver takes you where you want to go. That's really software as a service, but you have the responsibility in terms of identification and authentication. Then, platform as a service means you have the car, you don't need to worry about gas or servicing, or you need to get a driver. So you need to decide where you want to go. Okay, and then infrastructure as a service means you're responsible for the gas, you're responsible for the driver, you're responsible for oil and everything. So depending on the model you are in, you need to take responsibility for your part of the deal. Happenings in our field, new things to talk about, emerging threats and things like that. And so I also want to appreciate the organizers for putting this kind of program together. And for those of us that were able to make it here early, could you please put your hands together for yourselves, because I think that's so what? say is, while you try to improve on security, just ensure that with your organization, you are aligned from a strategic perspective. Otherwise, security in silence will never work. I hope I've been able to answer your questions. Thank you.
Congratulations!